Welcome to GMOs Revealed. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Gentempo, and in this episode, we have 3 interviews for you that can be life-changing. We start out with our interview with Dr. Edward Group in Houston, Texas at his Global Healing Center, and I was really stimulated by what Dr. Group had to say. Not only does he have a lot of wisdom, but he's got a great vision for how to achieve health in this environment where we have GMOs and glyphosate and all these other toxins. Then we have an interview with Jayson and Mira Carlton, who wrote the book Rich Food, Poor Food. And you're going to learn things about food that you never knew before and understand the implications of GMOs and how it affects food. And Tony Bark conducts that interview. You're going to love it. Lastly, we have a personal hero of mine, somebody who stood up against the big giant Monsanto and was extraordinarily effective. But here's why she's a hero. She was a stay-at-home mom. Tammy Canal created March Against Monsanto, and in its first year, over 3 million people joined the march. That shows you the power of one. It shows you that as you see when there's fraud and malfeasance and corruption in our culture by our government, by big multi-billion-dollar organizations, that a single person can make a difference and motivate millions of people to take action. And that's what Tammy Canal did. If you want some inspiration in your life, watch that interview with Tammy Canal. So enjoy this episode. Thanks for inviting us to the Global Healing Center here in Houston, Texas. Tell us your name and what your background is.
So my name is Dr. Edward Frank Group III. My background's in natural medicine. I'm also a chiropractor. And the mission that I'm here to accomplish is to really educate people on the root cause of disease, looking at all of the chemicals, all of the toxins that people are exposed to in the environment in which they live, whether it's the air they breathe, the water they drink, the food that they eat, and teach people how to reactivate their self-healing mechanism, what the most powerful medicine that they have inside of them, and the best way to do that to move forward so they can live a happy and healthy life.
How long have you been doing this work?
Been doing this 20 years now, 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's a mission to try to help as many people as I possibly can.
What got you interested in this subject?
What got me interested was watching my parents and my grandparents die of cancer. I mean, I lost both my parents to cancer in my early 20s. My dad was one of the chief chemists for Exxon. He was the developer of PVC plastics, and he was the inventor of saran wrap. So he died when I was in my 20s because of throat cancer. And I really started looking at wanting to be in natural medicine. I met a guy that was doing natural cancer treatment and research, and he kind of got me into looking at the different alternatives to healthcare. And that kind of sparked my interest because I had gone through the whole medical allopathic model and I wasn't seeing any success. So I started looking outside that model, opening up my mind to different possibilities and opportunities, and really started looking at chiropractic as a method to where I could go get a doctorate degree and then focus more on doing research and finding out the root cause of cancer, the root cause of disease, and the different methods that were available dating back 2,000, 3,000 years of how physicians treated different types of illnesses and diseases throughout the years.
What kinds of things did you find through your research? I think you even said earlier when we were talking before we started the interview that you were doing some cancer research while you were still in school. What kind of things did you find that surprised you most?
What surprised me most was the suppression. When we started doing, when I was involved with a research team at MD Anderson in 1996, 1997, our job, that's when the big cancer hospitals around the United States were bringing in what they termed CAM, complementary alternative medicine. What they were doing was really hiring these and getting these research teams together to see what their competition might look like in the future. We didn't know that, of course. We wanted to just see, we thought it was really cool to go track down all these doctors that were working and using natural medicine and different herbs and different technologies, whether it was Rife technology or whether it was ozone technology or far infrared or detoxification and cleansing or herbal infusions, depending, there was always a big combination that these doctors were using. Mm-hmm. Our job was to find and gather all that research and bring it back. And when we did, we found out real fast that this is not what the allopathic medicine model wanted, that we were a threat to the pharmaceutical companies. And all that research was squashed. And so the biggest eye-opening thing for me, we thought we were bringing these natural methods that could cure every single disease known to man to America, and that these were going to be mainstream news, and that we wouldn't have cancer problems anymore, heart disease problems, diabetes problems, or any degenerative illness problems anymore. Now, what we found out was exactly the opposite. You know, these cures are being suppressed. These cures are being suppressed from the media. They're being suppressed from the medical doctors, and they're being withheld. And not only that, there's campaigns designed to squash. The FDA is there to hunt down these natural practitioners. We found evidence of natural practitioners being killed. You know, there's a big money-making opportunity in pharmaceutical medications and chemotherapy and radiation, especially trillion-dollar industry. So any threat to that industry, they will do anything in their power to prevent the general population from finding out this information.
Well, it's a hell of a way to launch a career, right? You get into it with this intention. You hook up with a very reputable, research facility and treatment facility. You're unleashed to go now study all this stuff and plug it into an existing system that would be a distribution network for what you found. You find it, you come back, and it's all torched. It's buried. So, what did that do to you? How'd you feel about that?
Well, considering the fact that I had people following me around in black cars and I was being harassed, it actually kind of made me get to the point where I wanted to get this information out to the public. And right around that time was when the internet was coming online. I can remember the 28K modems at that time, and that was right around 1998, and it was AOL and Netscape, and I saw that as an opportunity for the future to be able to put some of this information online and start educating people. When people were typing in their different diseases, and the information technology age was just being born, and people were getting access to information where never before they would just go in and they would believe whatever their doctor said. The doctor was God, right? And so if you wanted to find somebody that knew about natural medicine, it was always usually through word of mouth, and you would have to go in this, find this person and go into this secret location and all this. So I was a rebel, get this information out. So we started our own degenerative disease clinic right around 1998, 1999, when we had finished all this research, and we wanted to help people. I mean, when you really have the true desire to help people, you face your enemy all the time because you're trying to change the world. You're trying to go against the big corporations, the petrochemical corporations, the vaccine industry, the agricultural industry. I mean, you have all of these pharmaceutical industry, these organizations that are working together, and the deeper that you get and the deeper that you find the root cause of disease being an accumulation of the chemicals produced by the agribusiness, the pharmaceuticals produced by the pharmaceutical, the petrochemicals produced by the oil and gas industry, all of these different things that are polluting the air and the food and the water and polluting the environment in which we live is what we identified as the root cause of practically every single degenerative disease. And when you do that, then the light goes off and you just want to share it with everybody, and you become excited, and you don't really care what they say about you. And you can be called a quack, and you can be called a witch doctor, and you can be called everything under the sun, but one thing speaks for itself, and that's results. When you start teaching people about this and how to recognize it and how to detoxify and cleanse their body and how to change their diet and how to drink pure, clean water and avoid all of the chemicals and toxins in their environment and in their life, then you're making a difference. And especially the gratifying moment of all that is when you see with your own eyes someone suffering from cancer, which is now a healthy individual, or suffering from heart disease or diabetes or arthritis or autoimmune problems. And when you actually can watch that transformation take place, and they're sitting there crying in your arms and saying thank you, and you're saying it wasn't me, it was you. You're the one that did all this, and you're the one that reactivated your body's self-healing mechanism. You need to take the credit for this because you changed your life. You have become a healthy person now.
That's awesome. That's got to be, you can never get tired of that experience, can you?
No, no.
Never gets old.
It's great.
So now, through your career, enter into the scene this new phenomenon of GMOs. Maybe let's start from the beginning. How do you view GMOs when they first came out? And you used a phrase I'd never heard before, GMOs 2.0. So I'd love for you to speak about that too.
Right, so one of the things that we've identified over the last 20 years is the damaging effects of foods in the intestinal lining, because we know that no matter what disease someone is suffering from, it's an accumulation of chemicals in the body. Well, you have to take a step back. How are those damaging things getting into the body? Well, we breathe a tiny, tiny amount of chemicals and toxins through our respiratory system, and very small amount get absorbed in the blood because of our mucous membranes and everything else. Well, the mucous membranes lead back down into the stomach. So when we started looking and evaluating the levels of the chemicals and toxins that are coming into the body that are the cause of these diseases that are developing, we had to look at the food supply. And when we looked at the food supply, with the amount of research that we've been accumulating over the years, you have the genetically modified organisms, genetically modified foods, which means you're taking something natural and you're introducing a genetic material from another species, whether it's an animal or another plant, into the DNA of something else. Right there alone should be huge alarms going off all over the world. Mm-hmm. But when you have a government that's corrupt, a USDA that's corrupt, an FDA that's corrupt, that's run by Monsanto ex-employees and Syngenta and DuPont and all of these chemical corporations that were originally designed to be chemical corporations but now are getting into wanting to own the soil and the seeds of the planet and patenting these seeds, and then not only owning that, but owning the pesticide, herbicide, insecticide business as well. You have to look at, we have three things that we depend on. We have to breathe clean air, okay? There's no other companies that I can think of that are doing more damage to the world today than these companies like Monsanto and Dow and Syngenta and BASF, and these companies that are altering our soil, and that's running off into our water supplies. So it's poisoning the water, it's poisoning the soil of the earth, and it's poisoning the air of the earth. What do we need to survive? We need clean water, we need clean food, and we need clean air. And these companies are contaminating all three of those processes. So it's not just about eating genetically modified foods, it's also the damage that's being done because of the chemicals being sprayed on the genetically modified crops and everything else. Now, what we have learned, and all of the people that have come forward and everything that we've been fighting against for years and years and years, we know genetically modified foods. We have proof now that glyphosate, atrazine, some of the herbicides, as well as the genetically modified foods that have been created in the past, cause damage to the bowel, cause damage to the body, cause damage to the immune system, because we know now that all organ systems in your body are controlled from the gut. And so, it makes you wonder, if you want to wipe out a population, or if you want to create illness across the globe, globally, what is the first place that you attack? You attack the gut of every single individual. We know that the lymphatic system is directly related to the gut. We know the brain-gut connection now. We know the appendix now controls every single system in the body, or there's a connection between that. So it's almost scary if you think was there some planning behind this? Because they know, or do they know, that if they disrupt and damage the gut, that they're ultimately going to create massive amounts of disease and sickness in the population all over the world.
So when they come back and say, but people are starving and we need to increase crop yields, et cetera, how do you respond to that?
There's never been any crop yields. I mean, it was all a marketing ploy. It's proven fact that sustainable growing technologies are going to produce better food and more crops. There's enough food on this planet to feed everybody on the planet 1.5 times over at any given time.
So we don't have a food production issue, we have a food distribution issue.
We have a food distribution issue, and that's also being controlled by big corporations. I mean, what we have is the main cause. If you want to look at the root cause of disease and you want to take it even a step farther from people eating and being exposed to all these chemicals, then you start looking at who is producing these chemicals,
right,
who is approving these chemicals. It's very easy to write an executive order, let's say, and say we want to ban genetically modified foods. Let's write an executive order and ban glyphosate. That's the kind of letters that I'm writing to the government and saying, listen, let's address the root cause. This healthcare program that you have is still not addressing the root cause of the problem.
Right.
So not only do you have the damaging effects of the genetically modified foods that people are eating in the corn supply, the soybeans that are being produced, which are also estrogen mimickers and creating hormonal disruptions. You have massive allergies that are happening right now with children because of the genetically modified foods. We never had allergies. I mean, I had one kid when I was growing up in school that had allergies. Now you have like over 90% of the children that have multiple allergies because the formulas, the baby formulas that are high in GMO residue and herbicide residue. You have all of the different types of corn. You have wheat byproducts and hybrids now that are coming onto the market. You have zucchini. You have cottonseed oil. You have canola seed oil. You have all of these different things that are going to be introduced with 90% of the processed foods that people are buying today that have traces of genetically modified organisms or traces or massive amounts of glyphosate or atrazine. Atrazine is Syngenta's big herbicide. Roundup, glyphosate, is Monsanto's big herbicide, which is contaminating even organic farms right now. Mm-hmm. So yes, GMOs are causing a major problem. And when we talk about the health consequences, and you look at cancer, you look at reproductive problems right now, the tests that have been done on genetically modified foods that show the 3rd generation of rats are infertile. We never had fertility clinics on the corner, every single corner. I didn't even know what a fertility clinic was 10 years ago. Now we have massive fertility clinics everywhere across the United States.
With these rat studies that you just cited, are you talking about the impact of the GMO in and of itself or the GMO and the toxins that are sprayed on it?
Well, I think it's a combination of both and individually, really, because Syngenta, Monsanto, some of these agri companies are very strict about releasing any of their seeds for independent scientists to do research on. So it's very hard to get a hold of these things, and then the independent scientists that do studies on it end up getting attacked, and they end up losing their jobs over it and everything else. So I think that, number one, if you take just glyphosate and atrazine, for example, atrazine, one of the top endocrine disrupting chemicals out there, if you start looking at the reproductive, the infertility, I think that not only, it's hard to say when you combine so many chemicals together what's really going to be happening, right? So let's say that you are eating genetically modified foods that are sprayed with glyphosate. You could take the glyphosate and do an independent study on the rats with just glyphosate, and I guarantee you're going to find all kinds of problems. You could take genetically modified corn with the Bt toxin and do independent studies on rice, or even without the Bt toxin. And you're still going to find problems with the mice or the animals. The animal industry is completely turned upside down because of the genetically modified foods that they're being fed.
So it steps up. So it's a one direct feeding, but then it's feeding what we're eating.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean,
in the way of
you
animals,
can talk to people at meat processing plants that cut open pigs and cattle that have been fed genetically modified foods, and they'll tell you they know that animal was fed genetically modified foods because of the color of the meat is different, and the smell is putrid because of some of the genes that cause that putridity to happen with GMO foods. But the big question is, who's doing scientific research on mixing glyphosate with aluminum, with toxic cleaning products, with VOCs, with pesticide residue, other pesticide residue, and all the other chemicals and toxins that we're breathing in and drinking in, and high fructose corn syrup and all of the other things?
Well, this is a really good point, because it's one thing to say we'll study any of those things on the list you just made individually, but that's not the same thing as what we're experiencing, in the environment collectively. You start, because what happens is you start putting these things together, and there's emerging properties that cannot be identified from the individual elements. So that's got to be a very significant thing, because as you just posed the question, who's looking at that? And the answer is, I don't know of anybody. Do you?
No, I mean, and everybody's environment is different. Let's say you have highly contaminated water supplies in the United States and around the world. And I say United States because the United States uses the most pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and all that. We're talking about just glyphosate or atrazine, but there's hundreds of other fungicides and all kinds of other chemicals that are running off into the water supply. Not only the hundreds of herbicides, insecticides that are being used on the fields, but then combine the fluoride in the water, the chlorine in the water, the prescription drug residue in the water, all of the hormones that are being put in the water, and then you have this big slew, like a witch's brew, of all these chemicals and pesticides, insecticides, and chemicals that are going into the tap water. Then you have a hexavalent chromium coming in there, and you have all these things that are reactive, and a lot of times those cannot even be filtered out. And these all affect you and affect the environment and affect your systems in your body, and everybody is different. So yes, I mean, these are major chemicals that are being sprayed on the food supply, but the grand picture of everything is how many chemicals with those combined are you consuming on a daily basis?
And the answer is too many.
Too many,
Yeah.
Too many.
So if that wasn't bad enough then, as far as looking at GMOs, genetically modifying food, which just intuitively says, that should be really, really well tested before we even think about, opening it up to the world, which hasn't been done. And secondly, compound it with all the toxins, et cetera, and we lead to this situation where you started out saying, my whole purpose in life is to help people with especially these very debilitating and chronic diseases, yet we're manufacturing them literally through the big corporate interests, who also get to buy political interests, and next thing you know, we're sitting with a logarithmic rise of these diseases in the world and in humanity. And what drove you is the fact that your own parents who had succumbed to cancer and a chronic disease, and then now you see this expanding. I mean, it's actually like there's not been an outrage that said we have to trim this back. So now after 20 years, you seem still very energized by your purpose. What does it feel like now compared to where you started, and what do you feel like your cause is now?
Well, I mean, last I checked, Monsanto had 18 lobbying groups that they were paying millions and millions of dollars to, and it all starts in the political arena. But I have noticed progress, and that's the good news. The good news is because of the internet, because we dedicate our lives to getting this information out there so people can do their own research and make their own decisions in their life. We have the Non-GMO Project. We have March Against Monsanto. We have all the GMO documentaries, the anti-GMO books that are coming out, all of the YouTube videos on anti-GMOs. It's not so much behind the scenes anymore. So I think that the consumers are the one. Obviously, we're not going to make progress in politics, or it takes years and years and years to make progress in politics. I always say it's we, the people, that are the ones that create the fastest change. And if you look back 10, 15, 20 years ago, we've made a significant change. You have General Mills now making changes. You have big corporations, big giant corporations that are going GMO-free or coming out with lines of GMO-free foods. So that's not because politics, and that's not because the senators and congressmen and everything said say no to GMO.
Right.
That's because we are understanding what it's doing to our bodies, and we're consciously making that effort to not buy products that contain GMOs. So that's the exciting part. You know, years ago, you would have to wait years and years and years to see a little bit of change, but I think that we're almost at that tipping point right now where we're actually starting to see the change take place. And that's what keeps me going, and that's what's exciting to know that there's more organic farmers. All the farmers that in India that have committed suicide over GMO crops out there, all the farmers that Monsanto has sued because they're utilizing their seed, and all the farmers that are turning and saying, wait a second, this is not working for me, let's start doing organic growing, and the demand for organic growing is what that first and second and third stage of excitement is leading to.
Now from here, we go to GMO 2.0. What is that?
So all of the big seed companies, and by the way, the seed vault, which is one of the most heavily guarded areas in the world, which is owned by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, DuPont, Monsanto, all of them have a stake in that. So the grand design was to take over all of the seeds of the planet to where everybody was relying on them for their food. The scary thing that's been happening now is they've realized that there's a movement against GMOs. So what I call the next movement, what's happening right now, is GMO 2.0. And GMO 2.0 are these companies focusing on new technology, new genetic engineering, which is two different distinct things: gene editing and gene silencing. Now this is a touchy situation because the USDA and the FDA are actually on board with this, because they're saying you don't have to actually label it as a GMO because you're not introducing genetic material from another species into the organism. So this is what you're going to see in the future of genetically engineered plants.
So just to be clear, by some legal definition, it's not a GMO, but they're genetically modifying and genetically engineering here. So that's kind of a dicey thing. And is this a way that you're saying that they can circumvent even being a non-GMO, that they could say they're non-GMO when they really are?
As a matter of fact, the U.S. Organics, National Organic Program, is thinking right now about rewriting the rules on genetically modified organisms and allowing these genetically engineered foods into the National Organic Program. It's that scary. So you have gene editing and gene silencing. Well, the gene silencing is already in production and in grocery stores right now. The gene silencing is based on RNA interference. So what that is you're silencing a gene in that produce. For example, the Arctic apple, which the USDA and the FDA approved for sale and is actually in sale right now in different parts of the United States, which we don't know where, unfortunately, that keeps an apple from turning brown. So what they do is they go in and they suppress the gene that creates the oxidation to prevent the apple from turning brown.
And that's by interfering with the messenger RNA, basically, so that it doesn't trigger and it doesn't turn on and let it turn brown. So now,
it's gene silencing. So they're silencing the gene through RNA interference. They're basically cutting it off so the apple doesn't turn brown anymore.
And we know that, I think it was Aristotle that said that nature does nothing uselessly, right? So if the whole genetic evolution, what is communicated, what genes are turned on and turned off based on environmental cues, to get rid of that, and to think that you could do that without consequence is kind of really arrogant, isn't it?
To me, it's playing God.
Yeah.
You're taking something that was created a specific way. There's a reason why the apple oxidizes very rapidly. Same thing happened with the innate potato. So that's another produce that's in stores right now that went through the gene silencing program and was approved by the USDA and the FDA with no safety studies, rushed through, and people are eating it right now. So you have the potato and the apple, and there's over 385 synthetic biology projects going on right now. They call it synthetic biology. There's actually procedures in place now where you can synthesize DNA from a computer and use that for gene alterations as well. So the way they're getting around this whole genetically modified organisms are, all the laws have been written on genetically modified organisms being able to insert a gene from another plant species. But this isn't inserting a gene from another plant species. This is manipulating a gene, turning it off, or through gene sequencing or gene engineering, or through gene editing, which was developed by the Broad Institute in Boston, one of the top genetic research companies. And gene editing is like a Word document, and you go in and you actually edit it, but this is with DNA and with genes. Mm-hmm. So they have what's called CRISPR technology or TALEN technology, mm-hmm. or zinc finger nuclease technology, to where they're able to actually go in and edit the genes to create or to alter the expression of those genes. So it's not silencing the gene, it's actually editing the gene.
Have there been any research studies done around this new technology?
As a matter of fact, the Columbia University Medical Center just came out with a study on this CRISPR technology, this gene editing technology, and they found hundreds of mutations that can happen using this technology. So we have a serious problem on our hands right now, especially in the United States and around the world, because this is the direction these companies are going. They're utilizing this new gene engineering technology to alter the same genetic code, the same DNA in the plant, and our government is not doing anything about it because the government says the genetics have not been modified with another species. It's just those individual genes are being engineered and changed. Now that's scary when these things can just go right through the FDA approval process, right through the USDA approval process with no safety studies on how they're going to affect the environment and how they're going to affect us as individuals. If you eat a genetically engineered produce and that gene, which has been designed to either turn off or has been altered, what do they think is going to happen in your body? You're going to break it down, and your body uses plant DNA and plant genes to function. You could be potentially changing your genes, changing your DNA, and you could become a hybrid.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe it has to have an impact. I mean, the only question is it an impact of consequence or not? And, why do we need to be an experiment to find that out? Shouldn't that be found out some other way? But what's especially disturbing about this is in the GMO testing that happens now, I buy everything, I look for that little label saying, no GMOs, right? These particular foods will not show positive in those labs, will it?
No, it won't, because it's not a genetically modified piece or genome from another species. As a matter of fact, we have the GMO labeling law mm-hmm. that is supposed to be in effect in the next couple years. But what Monsanto and all these big corporations are doing is they're trying to make it to where it's very lax, and they can put an 1-800 number on the label, or they can put a QC code on the label and not actually have to say on the label that the product is genetically engineered. And that's exactly what's happened with the Arctic apple, because on their label, on their packaging right now, they do not have an area on the packaging that says this product is genetically engineered. They have a QC code on the label where you're supposed to know as a consumer how to access that information about your food and then determine that it's actually genetically engineered. As a matter of fact, Del Monte, the largest producer of pineapples, was just approved to come out with a pink, luscious, sweet pineapple. And they used the same RNA interference technology to turn off the carotene gene inside the pineapple so it doesn't turn yellow. It actually is going to turn pink. So now they're going to start selling pink pineapples. So what they're going to say, well, you get more lycopene in it. And companies are producing fruits which have higher antioxidants by working with this gene engineering technology. There's been potatoes. There's a hybrid wheat that's scheduled to come on the market in 2022. So we have serious situations that we need to identify and let people know, because this is not in the mainstream news. And people are going and getting this produce, and all of this stuff is being fed to the animals, and especially people that eat meat. I mean, they need to understand that the majority of the livestock are being fed these genetically modified foods, and not only that, eating and consuming high levels of Roundup and herbicides and pesticides that are getting into the meat. And then it's the cycle, the revolving cycle of where did your food come from? How was your food contaminated? You know, if you think about that before you place something in your mouth and you just say, where did this food come from? You know, then you can start thinking and start analyzing back and saying, is it contaminated, is it not? I can guarantee you that if you eat out in any restaurant, you know, aside from certified organic restaurants, and you start asking restaurants, you know, what kind of cookware they use, what kind of oils they use to cook with, what kind of water they wash and cook their vegetables and their stuff in, you're going to find that, look, we've created a society where it's very easy to overeat. There's food everywhere. There's packaged food everywhere. There's plastics in the food supply. Most of the food that you're going to get is going to have genetically modified stuff in it, and it's going to be contaminated with all this stuff. Children are 10 times, 20 times, 30 times more susceptible to these chemicals and to these genetically modified things. Their body is growing. Their stem cells are still producing. So when you take these genetically engineered foods, or you take these genetically modified foods, or you take all these different chemicals that are all mixed in and you introduce those into a child's body, you're just creating havoc, because these poor children are going to be coming down with all kinds of autism. They're going to be coming down with massive allergies. And the body always gives you a sign and a symptom. It's just that we're not ever taught to recognize these signs and symptoms. So what do? We take our children, or we go to the doctor's office. We spend 7 minutes with the doctor. The doctor diagnoses us with some weird thing. We get put on prescription medications and sent home. It's not about what are you eating, what are you drinking, what is your environment like, what are your stress levels that you're dealing with. Stress alone has been, talking about genetically modified foods, they're already a lot harder to digest. When you incorporate a society right now, which we're dealing with, 90% of the people out there suffer from stress at least 3 to 4 times a week, or bouts of stress. What does stress do? It puts you in a sympathetic state. Right. You stop digesting your foods. One of the big scenarios is if your body takes 24 hours to digest a meal, and your body, 25% of the energy your body creates every single day goes to digesting one meal, and you're eating 3 or 4 genetically modified meals every single day, then you're going to have to take 4 or 5 days just to digest that. The proteins are going to turn putrefactic. The carbohydrates are going to ferment. The fats are going to turn rancid. Not only do you have all the residues from the genetically modified and the genes that are altering your digestive cells, killing off all your good probiotic in there, but you also have putrefaction. You also have all these other chemicals from the toxic sludge that's sitting in your intestinal lining. All of that combined is just wreaking havoc on the digestive system, and you're utilizing all your energy stores. And when you combine stress into that factor, and you're in a chronic state of stress and sympathetic state, then you can have undigested food in your system for a week at a time, and you're just adding it in and adding it in and adding it in. And that's why some of the new ways to alleviate some of these situations is, number one, just don't eat genetically modified foods and educate yourself about them, and continually educate yourself about some of the new technology that's out there. That's the beauty of the internet. You can type in GMO and you can go under news and you can see all, what's happening in the industry and things like that. And to detoxify your system and to repair your bowel and to cleanse your bowel on a regular basis. And even, pure clean water, a 72-hour water fast will help repair the intestinal tract and the bowel. And that's why, doctors are having so much success by just taking people off genetically modified foods and seeing that it does make a difference.
It's sort of horrifying that we've gotten to this point as a species that we have to become hyper vigilant just when it comes to eating. I mean, it really shouldn't be this hard, right? I mean, we shouldn't have to have all these considerations. It's because it's what you're saying. It's not even just, okay, what's the source of the food? Now the food comes in. What's it being washed in? What's it being cooked in? I mean, all of those steps along the way all have an influence. And if it's, if it's being cooked in aluminum, if it's being washed with, bad water, I mean, all of these things all add up. And, I think what a lot of people, at least in the corporate interests that are maybe malevolent in nature, that, when they probably count on the fact that the vast majority of human beings aren't going to be that vigilant. They can't be that vigilant. They're working, they're raising kids, they're taking care of a household, et cetera. To add all this hypervigilance onto it is almost insurmountable for most people. And when you look at what it's doing, to the environment in the future, et cetera, as you lay this out, and I'm thinking about it, because you also said, so what happens? Symptoms start to emerge. You bring the kid to a medical doctor. They do an evaluation. Then they send him home with prescription drugs, which is now, further perpetuating this cycle of adding additional things, which are probably going to further disrupt the balance of the gut flora, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you see all this, and you see it very clearly. You can tell how it just flows out of you. And then you recognize, my God, how do we try to create solutions, for people that are living in everyday life? So, what do you see? So, if I'm the parent now, or the person who's responsible for a household, what do you think some of the low to the ground, simple solutions are to help, get my family to a safe place?
Well, first, you have to recognize what the toxins are, and you have to learn about what you're eating, what you're drinking, what you're breathing. The sad thing that's happened is the earth has actually become the genetically modified organism, and the earth itself is sick. The water supply on the earth is contaminated. The vegetation is contaminated. The earth itself is contaminated and sick, and that we're all one. I mean, we're connected to the earth. Mm-hmm. And as we continue to poison the earth, we continue to poison ourselves. So it's even hard to get the proper nutrients that you need, sometimes even with an organic diet. So the first step I always say is education, right? I mean, when we were seeing patients, I would always say, do you know why you have cancer? Do you know why you have diabetes? Do you know why you have heart disease? No, I don't. Are you telling me that all the doctors that you've been to in the last 20 years have never explained to you why you have that disease? And they say no. Well, don't you need to understand why you have something, or what that individual food component or drink component or whatever is doing to you before you understand how to fix it, right? I'm not going to go rewire a house because I'm not an electrician. I'll have to learn about electricity first before I go do that. So step number one is, to me, is always education. Let me explain to you why you have the disease that you have. The reason you have it is because you're taking in 100,000 chemicals and toxins from food every day. You're taking in 100,000 toxins and chemicals from your beverages that you're drinking every day. You're taking in 100,000 toxins from the stress levels that you're under every single day. You're taking in all these chemicals and toxins from the parasites and the microbes that are living in your body that are secreting all these chemicals and toxins. You're taking in all these chemicals and heavy metals. Now that you understand your body can only process, let's say, 1 million chemicals or toxins that are coming in, but you're bringing in 2 million on a daily basis, what do you think happens? Well, the gut is the first thing, then the liver, and then your body doesn't have your elimination routes, your natural elimination routes are blocked, right? That's another thing that's happened with genetically modified foods, is it blocks your elimination routes. Constipation. Most people should be having 2 bowel movements a day. But when you start putting all that stress and all those chemicals and all those food particles in that are destroying the natural motility of the bowel and burning holes with the Bt toxin through the intestinal lining, and all of these undigested food particles and chemicals are leaking into the bloodstream, what is the body to do? Okay, your natural elimination routes through respiration and sweating, you're not doing enough activity anymore, so that's 50% of your elimination routes blocked or only maybe working 10 or 15%. Then you have urination. Well, people aren't drinking enough pure, clean water, so they're not urinating enough. That elimination route is blocked or not functioning 100%. Defecation is not working. You're not having your 2 bowel movements a day. And then for women who have 5 elimination routes with menses, how many women do you know that are having regular menstrual cycles? So if you take away all of the natural elimination routes, how we eliminate chemicals, how we eliminate toxins from the body becomes overburdened. It becomes too many chemicals. So what does the body do at that point? This is the root cause of all disease. Whether it's cancer, it starts dumping all these chemicals and toxins in one area and then walls it off. If it's diabetes, it dumps the chemicals and toxins in the pancreas, and then the islet of Langerhans, your cells breathe just like you breathe, and then they become coated with all these chemicals and toxic material, and they ultimately can't function, they can't breathe, they can't reproduce, they can't do all these things. It happens at the cellular level, and that's diabetes. Heart disease, your body just dumps the toxins in the arteries and in the cardiovascular system. Arthritis, your body dumps the toxins in the joints. So it doesn't matter what you're dealing with, it's just a sign that your body has way too many chemicals and toxins coming in, and you're not able to eliminate them fast enough to keep up. And that's when your self-healing mechanism starts going down, that's when your immune system starts to suffer, and that's when you need to really pay attention to what you're dealing with so you can learn how to change your lifestyle, switching over to organic, clean, healthy foods. Even better, putting your own garden in, because you still lose the energetic value. Most of the stuff, even organic, is picked before it's actually ripe, and then it has to travel to your grocery store. But identifying the things, the aspartame, all of the different chemicals in your kitchen that you're going to be exposed to in the foods that you eat, and making that switch away from genetically modified foods, genetically engineered foods, to organic, healthy foods. Changing up the water that you're drinking to pure, clean, organic, healthy water. Reducing your stress levels. Opening up your elimination routes again, paying attention to how much you sweat and breathe through respiration and sweating, paying attention to your urination patterns, paying attention to your digestive patterns, and healing the gut first. I mean, every single thing starts in the gut. Disease starts in the gut, but health also starts in the gut at the same time. And taking some good probiotics, cleaning your gut on a regular basis, and then moving on to the liver and cleaning the parasites and the chemicals and all the metals out of your system, and cleaning all of that accumulated toxic buildup in your system that's bringing you down, that may be causing your stress, that may be causing your depression, your anxiety, you feeling sick and no energy in the afternoons, and just healing your body the natural way it was intended to heal. Thousands of years ago, they didn't have all prescription medication. They didn't have even a lot of herbal technology. The only thing they would do is just put you in the sun and have you drink pure, clean water until your disease went away. And I think we're slowly starting to get back into that, and people are starting to realize that the biggest, deepest, darkest secret the medical profession hopes you never find out is how you can heal yourself without them involved. And you can take responsibility for your own health, and you can heal your own self, and it doesn't take a lot of time and effort to do. It just takes a little bit of education.
Your passion around all this is certainly observable, but it's also contagious. You've got me really excited. But I think what's great is that you've identified the problem, I think, comprehensively, real good macro view and showing, all the different pieces of it. But then also, solutions and potential solutions and some things that maybe provide some hope that we can get past this and get to a healthy place again. Although I think the challenges are pretty big. But I do want to say thanks so much for sharing your wisdom, your passion, and bringing it here to GMOs Revealed so that our viewers can get a deeper understanding of what's going on and what they can do about it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I'm always, right along that line of trying to educate and help as many people as we can, and bringing awareness to the dangers of this new GMO 2.0 technology, as well as the dangers of all the chemicals that are sprayed on the current GMOs and the GMOs in the food supply today. So hopefully everybody will be going into their kitchen right now and cleaning out and looking at all their foods and making sure that they don't have any genetically modified foods in their kitchen.
Rest assured, I think that's going to happen. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Mira and Jayson, thank you for talking to me, first of all. I'd like you to start off by telling me about the book, your book, what's different about it, what it's about, and what it pertains to.
Well, Rich Food, Poor Food takes the consumer directly into the grocery store and teaches them how to find the foods that are actually going to keep them healthy. And by healthy, we're not talking calories and fat and carbohydrates. What we're talking about for the first time is micronutrients, or the vitamins, minerals, and essential fats that you need to sustain health. And on top of that, we add in the layer of making sure that there's nothing hazardous in the foods. We're covering making sure there's no pesticides, nothing is genetically modified, making sure there's no ingredients that have been known to cause cancer, no artificial colors, artificial flavors, and so on and so forth.
So that's really interesting. I mean, a lot of what I hear from the industry is that whether it's organic or pesticide use, pesticides have been used on the plant, or they're GMO, that nutritionally they're equivalent to plants that are organic. So, that's really the industry speak. And so I'm wondering what your take on that is, since if you're going out of your way to tell people who are buying your book what produce and what things they can buy that have no chemicals or not GMO or not pesticides, I'm assuming you must look at them differently in terms of the micronutrients. So what can you tell me about that?
Well, there's been some research studies done on conventional produce and then organic produce to look at whether or not they had more of these vitamins and minerals and essential fats than the conventional. So they came back that the organic foods in certain circumstances did have some more micronutrients than the conventional, but it wasn't a huge gap between the two. Really, what we try to do in Rich Food, Poor Food is really look at the overall health of the food, or the overall quality of the food. That's the key. So things like GMOs or pesticides, what they're going to do is they're going to lower the quality of the food because they actually deplete micronutrients from the food. So there's been many studies showing that pesticides rob our bodies of specific micronutrients, and GMOs rob our bodies of specific micronutrients. So they add to the overall value of driving down those essential micronutrients in our everyday diet.
So that's interesting, because it's not what you hear coming from the industry. Certainly, you're familiar with the Stanford study. So the Stanford study was a study where there were researchers at Stanford University, and they looked at the nutritional value, and they compared organic produce to produce that wasn't organic. And in the publication, actually, if you read the study, it did talk about the fact that there were pesticide levels noted in the produce that wasn't organic. But the way the study was billed, at least in the New York Times and some of these other media outlets that picked up on it, was that there was no real difference.
Right.
They focused on the micronutrients, and they said that there was really not much measurable difference. Now, the one thing they said that it was not funded, that the study was not specifically funded by the industry. However, when taking a closer look, the department had received a lot of money.
I was going to say, who funded the university?
Right, who funded the department?
That's what we really have to look to. We have to find out who's allowing this information to get out. And when it comes to university studies right now, so many universities are being funded by Monsanto. They're giving a lot of money. And if they don't if a study tried to come out of there that could in any way say anything against GMOs, believe me, they're going to say, we're taking your money back. We don't want this information getting to the public. So you have to look at that. Additionally, what Jayson was talking about, when you talk about micronutrient levels in terms of the food, well, we know that the glyphosates actually block a lot of the minerals from being absorbed.
And why don't you explain what glyphosate is?
Absolutely. So these seeds come Roundup ready. And what that means is it means that you can spray them with as much of this glyphosate as you want. And all it's going to do is kill all the other plants around the area and these weeds that they're trying to get rid of. But this can absorb more of it. And what happens when it absorbs it is it actually makes it so the plant isn't absorbing any of, or very low amounts of the micronutrients, especially the minerals that it needs in order to grow. So it's growing without the abundance that it should have. And then they feed it to an animal as feed. And the animals are now becoming heavily micronutrient deficient. And then we eat the plants and we eat the animals and we're becoming micronutrient deficient. And this is a really big problem in a world that's already filled with people that are in their 90% deficient in micronutrients already. And we can't allow this problem to get any deeper.
So glyphosate is the herbicide, which is often referred to as a pesticide, but it's the herbicide
Correct.
that is sprayed on these plants that are Roundup ready or glyphosate ready, so they won't die from the herbicide. And then what you're saying is that this chemical leaches the minerals, the micronutrients out of the plant, so when you eat them, they're deficient.
Absolutely.
So then you're deficient.
Absolutely.
So it's a problem that I don't hear the industry talking about. I mean, clearly what we hear is that these plants, are going to feed the world, and certainly with their vitamin A rice, which I know are not commercially available, but that's the goal, is to get more vitamin A. Do you know anything about the rice? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so they've got this rice that's supposed to be for areas that are vitamin A deficient. They've created this rice that's supposed to have more vitamin A in it. The problem is you'd have to eat almost 30 bowls of the rice to get the amount of vitamin A that you need in order to be sufficient. So it's not really going to help to change the problem of vitamin A deficiency very much, and we're not really looking at feeding the world. We've got more than enough food in the world for the people. The problem is getting the food to the people.
Additionally, I'll add to that, vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin. So unless you're going to feed it to them with some sort of fat to help them absorb this micronutrient, then it's not a very well thought out plan.
Right, it's not. Interesting. So what can you tell me about the specific micronutrients that are lost because of the glyphosates chelating it? What specifically, and what can we do about it, and what are the worst foods that have the most glyphosate and the biggest deficiencies in these micronutrients?
Well, it's really kind of like a domino effect. So, so the glyphosates are going to deplete things like iron, copper, zinc, magnesium,
so all minerals.
manganese. Most of the minerals, yes. But it is the minerals that they're depleting, and so they're chelating onto these, and they're drawing them out of the food, and then again, of course, that food is being fed to our livestock, and our livestock vitamin A deficiency in cows recently is very high, and so our livestock isn't getting enough of the micronutrients either. And we're also seeing gut permeability with these GMOs and with glyphosate. So the food is going into the gut and it's creating a permeability, and so the food is going right out through the gastrointestinal system. It's not being digested like it should be.
The food permeability, I mean, have you seen that being linked to gluten sensitivity issues, celiac, autoimmune diseases?
Oh, absolutely. And the crazy thing is, it's just another level of why we're all becoming more and more micronutrient deficient. We need our gut in order to be able to absorb these micronutrients. So the very few that we're actually getting in are not being absorbed by the vast majority of people today because they're eating GMOs. We see gut permeability. Leaky gut is every other person has it these days. All the autoimmune disorders are on the rise. And we see almost 9 out of 10 people who are coming to talk to us these days have leaky gut issues.
So when you say the term leaky gut, what are you referring to?
the symptoms are across the board somewhat different. There's a lot of bloating, a lot of people with IBS, with different gastrointestinal tract problems. And a lot of times it ends up being people who have Hashimoto's, different autoimmune diseases, autism. Across the board, it's sort of reactive in different ways because it really depends which proteins are leaking out of your gut at different times.
So would you say that this is related to the increase in gluten sensitivity that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think that gluten sensitivity is playing a major role in this. I think a lot of people are becoming gluten sensitive, and I think gut permeability is playing a big role in that. Yes.
So you're seeing a lot of patients coming to you for advice because they have leaky gut, they have autoimmune diseases like Hashimoto's and some of these other problems. What advice are you giving them, and what advice do you give people in general? I mean, what's in your books? What are you telling people they can do to take care of their health and their family's health?
Well, not only do you have to get rid of the GMOs out of your diet, but we need to know what foods are genetically modified. We want to stay away from those, things like canola oil, corn, soy. So we know a lot of these. But now what about the derivatives? So soy lecithin, vinegar is oftentimes made from white corn or genetically modified corn. So our books, what we do is we go through the grocery store aisles and we show you how to stay away from genetically modified foods, both whole foods as well as their derivatives, and how to read an ingredient list so that you can recognize these foods when you see them.
What do you tell people who want to avoid the glyphosates, the GMOs, and they want more micronutrients? What can they do? What's the best thing to do?
Okay, well, we break down staying away from GMOs and we make it really, really easy in the book. That's our goal. So number one, look for things that are labeled non-GMO. I mean, it can't get any easier than that. It's printed on there, you're safe. Organic, again, safety right there. Now, there's other things that you can look for, and you can just go and things that are local, you can go and actually ask the purveyor of the food exactly how they make it and get your list of questions ready ahead of time. Make sure you've done a little information gathering and you know the questions to ask, like what kind of seeds and what was it sprayed with or did it come soaked, just simple questions like that. Additionally, just learn how to read a label. Learn that when you see things like aspartame, it's genetically modified most likely. Learn that when you see soy lecithin, for instance, it's probably genetically modified. And that's hiding in really crazy places. We were speaking lecture and it was in the tea bags right there as everyone was sitting and listening, and there was soy lecithin in the tea bags. And everyone, as we're speaking, read it and literally put the tea bags down. But it's just that little bit of education that can really change somebody's complete diet. Once you learn it, you mark it off, you don't buy that ingredient ever again.
That sounds really great. I mean, who would have thought there'd be lecithin in a tea bag? I can't understand why. So that sounds good. I mean, so it's really a how-to book.
Absolutely.
It takes you through, okay.
It's called a GPS. It's a grocery purchasing system. We don't want to make this hard. It should be so easy for people until labeling happens, and we don't know if we can ever count on it happening. We need to give people the tools to go and do it for themselves right now. And so that's what we're doing. We're giving you the point and shoot sort of, this is what it is, this is how to find it, and we name the brands that are doing it right, and we really call out the ones that are doing it wrong.
So even if it doesn't get labeled, even if GMOs never get labeled, your roadmap, so to speak, would keep people away from the GMOs.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give people the ability to take control of their health right now. So if they go in the grocery store and they follow our GPS or our grocery purchasing system, aisle by aisle, we're going to show them where the GMOs are, how to avoid them, the brands, and we're going to give them the ability to really change the landscape of the grocery store over the next 5 to 10 years, because it's really up to us. We have to stop looking for legislation to try to label these things and say, you know what, if we don't buy the food, we're going to hit those food manufacturers where it hurts most, and that's the pocketbook.
And that's the way to do it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're telling me that your book, anyone can take your book, and that's simple. It's not going to take an extra hour or two at the grocery store. You can go down every aisle, and it'll be very easy and obvious which brands you can pick that will not have GMOs.
Absolutely. We absolutely guarantee that nothing in there has GMOs. We called every single company, and we did the work for you because we want it to be that simple. So say in the milk aisle, you can read all about the history of RBST, the synthetic growth hormone, or you can simply go to the end of the chapter where we name the names and tell you what brands are doing it right and what brands are doing it wrong. And if you don't have time to read all that because you have a busy life, then so be it. Maybe it'll interest you later on and you can go back and read. If not, it's at the end of every chapter, we do have the highlights of which exactly what to look for in each aisle. It's that simple.
Now, I'm assuming that some of these companies will get bought, some of the smaller organic companies doing it right can get bought out in the future by the bigger conglomerates who aren't doing it right, and things will start changing, because that is what we've been seeing, isn't it?
Yeah, things will change in the grocery store, but we'll continuously update the book as things go on. So, you know, you can always go to our checkout checklist, and you'll always be able just to go down the aisle. Also, you don't have to be perfect. This isn't about, you know, going grocery shopping this next time and then everything's going to be perfect. It's taking it aisle by aisle. Just keep it really simple. Today it might be dairy. The next day it may be your produce. The next day it's going to be the macaroni and cheese your child still wants, or the ice cream your husband insists upon. We've got everything in the book. It's all in there. It's not difficult. The food doesn't taste any different because it's got GMOs in it or not. So the great thing is it's super easy to do, one aisle at a time. No one's looking for perfection. But by the end of the year, you're going to see that not only is your grocery going to be so much healthier, but your time in the grocery store are going to be cut down because you already know what you're going to go buy. It's not about what price point. It's about what the quality of food choice that you've already made in every aisle.
And this is really important because we might not get the labels on GMO, right?
Absolutely. It's the perfect example of where money talks. I mean, right now, California and Washington State lost. And they lost not because the people didn't want it. They lost because the money said we shouldn't have it. So what we're saying right now is the only way that we're going to get this is to do a groundswell. It's for us to find a tipping point and for us to come together and say to the grocery store, we want healthier food. We deserve healthier food, and we're not going to buy the food that contains genetically modified organisms. We're going to be picky, and we're going to put our money where our mouths are, and we're going to buy the things that are good for us and for our families.
So it's voting with our pocketbook.
It's voting with our pocketbook. Like you said, you know, in 5 years from now, we may not have this choice anymore. Right now, we have the choice to say, I don't want genetically modified food. If we don't do something about this today, in 5 to 10 years from now, we may not even have that choice.
I agree. And you're referring to contamination of conventional plants.
Absolutely.
Contamination of conventional plants. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's not just about not buying genetically modified food. By allowing genetically modified food to continue to be grown, we're taking a chance of conventional food being contaminated, you know, just through cross-pollination. So, you know, and this is something that we found out in researching our book, it may be labeled organic today, but if it's cross-pollinated with something that's genetically modified, the FDA is going to allow it to continue to be labeled organic down the line, as long as it started organic, even though it's now has genetically modified genes in it.
And so it's not a percentage where it maxes out. You're saying that if it was once organic, even if in 10 years it's all GMO because of cross-contamination, it'll still be called organic?
We have no way of knowing at this point. I mean, no one's going to go up to every single apple and do the test. Now, speaking of apples, it's one of the scariest foods, and this is the next genetically modified crops. We're going to be seeing genetically modified apples called Arctic apples in the near future. And they think this is a really great thing because you can cut it open, leave it on the countertop, and it's not going to brown for 10 days.
Whoa,
and they think,
so you can cut it open and it won't brown?
No, and they think this is
Okay.
a benefit to us because bruised apples will no longer be left in the stores. Now we're going to buy them because we're not going to know that they've been bruised. And they're going to be, I mean, think how great this is for places like McDonald's and fast food places. Chop it open, they don't have to put anything on them, and they can last for a very, very long time. Problem is, they're rotting on the inside. And we're giving each other food that is no longer really food. It's dying food. It's food that's losing micronutrients every single day. And this is not food that we should be eating.
So what do you know about the food that's in the pipeline right now?
So there's a few foods coming out. So the Arctic apple is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you've got this new genetically modified salmon.
Right.
So it wasn't very profitable to farm salmon. They ate so much food, and then the amount of meat that they could actually sell it was pretty much a wash. So they needed to do something with the salmon. So now they've genetically modified it so that it grows twice the size on half the amount of food. So this is what's happening in the near future. I think the FDA has now come out and said that this genetically modified salmon is accepted.
Yeah.
So you'll be seeing it in the marketplace soon. The problem is these genetically modified salmon, absolutely, I think this is one of the worst things that can be happening in our protein supply in America.
Can they breed with wild salmon?
Yeah. It's different than an apple. The apple's going to stay on the counter, and it's not going to breed with another apple, and it's not going to spread that way. Yes, there's pollination. But the thing with the salmon is they've already proven that, first of all, salmon in captivity gets out all the time.
Right.
And that's a really big problem already with the farm salmon. But now they've already found out that these new Aqua Bounty salmon, these new Franken salmon, are already being able to be with trout. So they're already multiplying with trout now. So now we already know it's getting out there. And there's no putting it back in. There's no getting rid of the problem once we let it loose.
Wow, that's really scary. And again, do we know what that was crossbred with, out of curiosity?
I don't know what it was crossbred with, but I know it's out competing natural salmon in the environment for food.
So it's going to overrun. I mean,
will
that'll be
overrun.
it. It'll take over.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very interesting. And do we know anything about the protein? Like, if you eat it pound for pound, is it the same amount of protein? Is it the same amount of
I don't think anyone's gotten their
omega-3?
hands on it to test at this point. I don't think anyone's...
But we do know from a micronutrient standpoint, farm salmon in general is not as micronutrient rich as wild-caught salmon. There's hundreds of percent more of the omega-3s in wild-caught fish than there are in farm salmon. Same with vitamin D. So
Even with what they feed the farm salmon?
Oh, especially with
Corn
what
pellet?
they feed. Yeah, so
no,
they're
but
feeding
don't
it.
they feed them like astaxanthin or zeaxanthin or lutein, something with the color?
They're trying. So you go to your grocery store and what do you see? You see farm-raised salmon and it's bright pink. It's even pinker than the real salmon. Why? Because it was colored that. So they had to artificially color it because it's not getting the natural foods that it should be in the wild. And it's also being fed corn pellets and soy,
terrible.
Something that these fish have never been fed
So
in history.
GMO corn
GMO
and
corn
soy.
and GMO soy, correct.
Yeah. So much of our protein
So it's
today.
GMO fish.
Yes, already.
Already,
And we have GMO
without the arc or whatever.
That's why we
the
always
salmon.
recommend that you have wild-caught fish.
And it's the same for our poultry, and it's the same for the beef. They're all eating genetically modified
Corn
foods
and
right
soy.
now. And the problem is that now we're just eating more and more. It's 80% of the foods in the grocery store have genetically modified foods now, ingredients. And that's a really sad situation.
And that is really just since 1997, 98,
Yeah,
right?
around
this is-
1992, between 1992 and 1996, we started to see the introduction of these genetically modified foods in our society. And there's more in the pipeline. You've got pink pineapples being grown down in Costa Rica that they're trying to be bringing out. And what's going to happen is once the apple comes out and once the salmon comes out, and if consumers don't rebel against it now, there's just going to be a parade of genetically modified produce. You know, these genetically modified giants like Monsanto's and others, their goal is to dominate the seeds globally. They don't want you to be able to grow your own seeds. They want to control the patent on all of them. And what we're doing is we're patenting life, and we can't allow that to happen. We need to take a stand right now. It may not seem like a big issue to you, but it's a huge issue. If you don't know about genetically modified foods, you need to start learning about them, and you need to really take a stand in your grocery stores before you won't be able to take a stand.
Well, I think people are standing up to it. I think there are there's a tide that's growing, and it does sound really scary. I mean, all the foods, you're right, all the foods that are in the pipeline, and the goal does sound like it's to own the food chain, and have control over the food chain.
Yeah.
And it's not just the food. We're actually creating genetically modified mosquitoes.
Yeah.
The mosquitoes are going to be let loose in southern Florida to get rid of dengue fever.
Yeah.
Now here's the problem. We don't know what's going to happen to these mosquitoes. We don't have little, backpacks on them making sure they go in the right direction and that they don't mate like they're not supposed to mate, even though we know that some of them are mating already. So this is just another thing. We're creating animals out there in nature that didn't exist, and we're really just playing with science.
Right, we're really playing with nature.
Yeah.
But that begs the question, like, everybody who I'm interviewing, I say that, the industry would say that if you question the safety and the value of GMO food, you are questioning science. You're anti-progress and you're anti-science.
I'm not anti-progress. I'm anti-progress that's setting us back. And that's how I answer it. We are going in the wrong direction in health in this country. And I don't care if they call it progress. I call it us going back to the dark ages. And we are seeing rickets already on this planet again. A micronutrient deficiency we had considered gone. But now all of a sudden, because our food is so warped, we're not getting the right amount of our nutrients, and we're seeing diseases that had already been destroyed. And they're back on this planet already.
Well, it's scary stuff. It's really scary stuff. I mean, I did read about the mosquitoes, and you're right. So that's being unleashed in Florida, and while that's not food, it's not food. It is part of the whole system it's part of the ecosystem, which could affect our food. It could affect our health. We have no idea. So what is the situation in other countries? I mean, it seems like most of the GMOs that are grown around the world are actually utilized in North America. Is that true? Is that not true? Do you know the situation in other countries?
Yeah, so we're not against science or progress. We're against America pushing GMOs down our throat when most other countries have said no to this. Europe has looked at it. Their scientists have looked at it, and they've said, we're not going to go there. You've got countries like Haiti who, I mean, they had nothing. They were given GMO seeds, and they planted them for a while. They looked at the crops, and they said, this is not natural. They burn it out of here. We don't even want the free seeds. So there are countries, I mean, GMOs are banned in multiple countries across the world. Of course, we created genetically modified food, so are we going to ban it here? Of course not. I mean, Monsanto is an American company. So, you know, there's just so much of this problem with Monsanto officials going into government and then going back to Monsanto and then going back into government. This is a major problem that we're having in the United States, and you know, I think that if people who think that we don't look at science, that we don't want progress, there's plenty of scientists out there who've looked at this work. They've seen that GMOs are unsafe, and we want progress, but we don't want progress down a rabbit hole we're never going to be able to turn back from. Once that genetically modified seed has infiltrated into the conventional crops, you can never take it out.
So, you know, if I'm just having something that has a little soy lecithin or a little corn syrup or cottonseed oil, it's just a small amount, you know, it's just here and there. Does it matter? Does it really matter for my health or my kids' health?
Absolutely. First of all, your child is much smaller than you, so it's going to affect your child more. But not only that, it's called bioaccumulation. It's going to build up in your body. So don't think of it as one small little drop. Think of it as this constantly accumulating matter inside your body that is foreign. It's just like the other things that they've created. Were they safe? They told you they were. DDT, Agent Orange, and now it's GMOs. I wouldn't even try a little bit in my body.
Oh, it's really great. Thank you. I mean, it sounds like a fabulous book. I'm really excited to read through the whole thing and keep doing what you're doing because we need it. Power to you.
Tell me your name and give me a bio sketch, your background.
My name's Tammy Canal. I founded the International March Against Monsanto in 2013 following the Prop 37 ballot initiative that happened in California. I'm a mom of 3. I'm a very concerned citizen regarding what's happening with an increasingly toxic food supply and the harm that chemical agriculture is posing to our world.
Let's go back before 2013, Tammy. So what was your life like? You were living in California.
Yeah,
and how were you living? What were you doing before this all unfolded?
Back in 2012, I was your typical stay-at-home mom raising a 6-year-old, and we had just actually had our second daughter. Doing the whole making baby food at home, cooking from scratch, just kind of, you know, really diving into my mom role. I volunteered at my daughter's school, so just very, very typical things.
What caused you to want to have that approach toward raising a healthy family where you're making your own baby food, et cetera?
It's the foundation that I was raised on. My mom was always really big on, you know, cooking, and I learned to cook at a very young age. I think 10 years old I was in the kitchen giving chores and helping out, and so it's just kind of been instilled in me from a very young age.
This is your life at this point. You're a stay-at-home mom. You have a new baby. You have a 5-year-old or 6-year-old. You're trying to raise them in a healthy way, and you're living in California. And what comes up that puts you on this path?
Well, I started seeing commercials for Prop 37, and I, you know, asked myself, what's a GMO? I've been around food and cooking, and I also, prior to being a stay-at-home mom, I was actually a server in the restaurant industry for 10 years, and never had I ever heard of a GMO. So
what was Prop 37? So what were the commercials?
Well, it was a lot of the pro-industry funded side of it, where, you know, your grocery prices are going to skyrocket. And I was just, you know, like I said, I'd never heard of a GMO, so my interest was piqued. And once I realized what GMO was, I was horrified.
What did you learn?
Basically that it's, frankenfood made in a lab with a lot of chemicals and stuff that I really didn't want my children ingesting. So I, basically started researching GMOs, found out about glyphosate and all the harmful chemicals that were being sprayed. Like I had said, I cooked from home and made my kids eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, so it was pretty horrifying to realize that these things that I thought were healthy were not. I used to feed my baby Gerber puffs and found out that those contain high levels of glyphosate. They're made with GMO corn, which is actually registered with the EPA as a pesticide. It's not even classified as a food. So all of this was just very startling to me, and we instantly started cleaning up our diet, purchasing organic, cutting back on meat just because of how factory farmed meat is fed, and just horrific stuff. And then also, upon my research, a lot of the corruption I learned about, it's very revolving door with our government and our regulating agencies that are intended to protect us. At that time, Michael Taylor was actually the head of the FDA. He's bounced back and forth between the biotech industry and various, he worked for the FDA and the USDA. So it was just such a blatant conflict of interest to me, and I was really shocked that that wasn't more of the forefront on the issue of Prop 37. It was.
And explain it, because there's some people who probably, if you're not from California, you might not understand what what Prop 37 means.
Right.
So can you just kind of explain what how California the legislative process works, where they can have these propositions and they put it up for vote, et cetera?
Right. Well, Pam Larry, who a lot of people in the movement would probably recognize that name, she's actually the one that was the instigator for Prop 37, a grandmother from Northern California. And she got the ball rolling, you have to get a certain amount of signatures, petition, and basically once you reach those goals, it becomes eligible to be a ballot initiative. And it was a simple initiative that would have just required the labeling of foods made with genetically modified ingredients. Very simple and straightforward.
Just a simple truth in labeling, right?
Exactly.
We're not saying outlaw them. We're just saying put on the label that this is a genetically modified food.
Exactly. Give the consumer the choice.
Yeah. So the understanding, even just so they know what they're buying.
Exactly.
And but yet there was big forces that came to bear against Prop 37. Now at this time, again, you're a stay-at-home mom. You're just trying to raise your family healthy. You're looking at ads on the TV. Were they anti-Prop 37 ads that you saw?
Yes, I believe it was $45 million ended up being spent to win that initiative, the pro-industry side. Companies like Monsanto, DuPont, Hershey's and Nestle, they just funneled tons of money into all these fear-mongering commercials, like I said, about your grocery prices are going to skyrocket. And as we know, companies change their product labeling all the time. Around Christmas, they bring out their holiday boxes and cans and et cetera. So it seemed really corrupt to me that we couldn't get a few simple words on packaging.
That was just the truth about what was in it. But what is the argument against wanting to properly label what's in the can or jar that you're buying?
Well, obviously they've got something to hide.
Yeah, so, but they're trying to say you're going to have these ill effects if we tell you the truth about what we're selling you?
Exactly. It's going to hurt their profit margins if people know that they're eating food made in a lab doused in cancer-causing herbicide.
So now, they were successful in their quest to kill Prop 37 too, weren't they?
Yes.
So when did you decide that you needed to become an activist?
It was a few months later in February. I decided to start a Facebook page. Just basically, I felt if people knew better, they would do better, because that was kind of like my experience. Once I knew what we were eating, we stopped and we changed our ways. And I just really wanted to raise awareness. So my initial goal was to get 3,000 people to, get out in the streets and hand out flyers and let their communities know what was happening to the food supply.
Was this in support of Prop 37, or is this after it was defeated? And then
this was after it was defeated.
So it's defeated. So now you just want people you take it to the streets on a grassroots level.
Exactly.
And how did that go?
Oh, it went pretty well.
Still tell us what happened.
So we had, it was actually an anarchist group in Europe that got involved because the European culture is very against Monsanto. GMOs are actually banned in much of Europe. And they were quite a force to be reckoned with that really helped the page go viral. I believe our first march, we had close to 3 million people around the globe in 51 countries on all 6 continents.
So let's not go too fast here. You say our first march. So there, before we get to the march against Monsanto, it started with a Facebook page.
Right.
You put it up, you hope to get some interest. Did the Facebook page blow up, as far as people?
It did. Our timing was really good because about a month after I had started the page, the Monsanto Protection Act was signed by President Obama, which basically granted Monsanto complete judicial immunity from any kind of lawsuits that, if someone wanted to sue because they got sick from eating this food that's not labeled Monsanto was protected. So it was just, it was so unconstitutional, and people were really angry about that.
Wow. So Monsanto was protected against liability for its product that it's selling into the public marketplace.
Complete judicial immunity. And on that note, when I touched on the corruption, one of our U.S. Supreme Court Justices, Clarence Thomas, actually is a former Monsanto attorney, and he refuses to recuse himself from any case involving Monsanto and has ruled in their favor every time. So we really don't have an ally.
Bring us into kind of the mindset, because here you are, a force of one. You have the knowledge to be able to protect your own family and kind of know what to do and what to look for, but you decided to take a public stand.
Right. Well, I don't want my kids growing up in a world where their friends are dying of cancer, from these harmful products. So I have a lot of family and friends that I care about what's happening to their children as well. So I just wanted everyone to know what is happening with our food supply, and how Monsanto is just so protected by, they're protected within the regulating agencies, they're protected on a federal government level. Obviously, President Obama wasn't looking out for his constituents, he was looking out for the industry.
So now, when you launched the Facebook page, did you already have the concept of the March Against Monsanto in mind? And was the Facebook page for that, or did the March Against Monsanto emerge from it?
I set the page up initially. I didn't wait for organizers to step forward. I basically just started going through and picking cities and creating events, and people, supporters were saying, oh, that one's near me, so I'm gonna go to it. So basically when it came time for an organizer to step in, they already had an event. Wow. So it really worked out quite well to go at that angle.
When was the first March Against Monsanto?
It was May 25th, 2013.
May 25th, it's the very first time. How many cities?
It was like 400, it was over 400.
Over 400 cities?
In 51 countries. It was really a global, it really ignited a global passion.
And how many people marched?
Close to 3 million.
3 million. Now, what were you expecting when you said you thought you'd set this thing up? What were your expectations?
We could see the momentum.
Right.
When I had initially started it, I didn't expect much. I honestly felt so many people are so docile and don't really care about things like this. But food affects all of us. We all have to eat. So we felt the momentum growing. We started getting a lot of publicity. Of course, our mainstream media chose to ignore it. We've never had media coverage for any of our marches. The only mainstream outlet has been RT to cover our events.
So now you set up, what was the time between when you initiated the Facebook page to the actual first march?
That might be the most incredible thing. I started the page on February 28th, 2013, and the march obviously happened May, just a few months later. And it just, it went viral. It really did. It was quite something to watch. It was quite a roller coaster to be on.
No kidding. And then 3 million people in cities all over the world in 51 countries take up the torch. So now what happens? Where there are also people coming to attack you as the founder of this thing, and what was your experience as far as the personal attacks?
There wasn't really any at first. Since the evolution of the march, we actually now have a group called Man Myths. So we have protesters protesting us at our events, which is kind of ironic. The typical defamation stuff, articles being written that were like anti-science, which I feel the science has never settled on anything, and we should always be evolving. And I think it's more anti-science to accept, things as the way they are, instead of trying to learn more and do better as far as not using chemicals.
Well, it's a science as orthodoxy, right? And suddenly now anybody who questions it
Exactly.
You are a sinner.
Yeah.
in essence.
It's funny because it's become like a religion.
Yeah. So now the march has gone on for several years. How has it evolved?
It's gotten bigger, at least overseas. I feel in the U.S. people are kind of, again, placated into thinking that we can't do more to stop this. It honestly does seem like quite a David and Goliath battle against just this conglomerate of an organization. Monsanto's huge, and they have deep pockets, and obviously, as I said earlier, the allies of our regulating agencies and federal government working in collusion with them.
Yeah. 3 million people marched the first time. This continues to grow year over year. Did the mass media cover this, the popular media?
Not once.
Not once.
Okay, I need to retract that because we did have a Twitter storm. Again, we tweeted and blew up Jake Tappers, who works for CNN, his social media, because we were outraged. At this time, it was one of the biggest global events, global protests to have taken place, and they ignored it, and it goes, in line with who they receive their advertising money from, and they can't, hurt their sponsors' reputations.
Wow. So it's almost inconceivable. Over 3 million people worldwide organize because they have a common cause that they want to protest. And the media just ignores it. It's like a media blackout. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of extraordinary to show the influence of the corporations on not only politics, mm-hmm. but on the media. It's kind of all one machine wrapped together, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Wow. So as this is unfolding over time, what other things emerge? What else did you see happen?
Well, since the first March, we've seen, I feel like we've really went on a consumer level more and more. Every time I go to the store, there's more organic options, more non-GMO options. Since the first March, Kroger, Smith's, Ralph's, depending on your area of the country, they actually launched it's Simple Truth, and it's an entire generic brand of organics. And every time I go grocery shopping, I support that label so much. And they constantly keep rolling out new products because there's a demand for food that isn't poison, right, essentially.
And so tell me what your view is of that. Obviously in our docuseries here, we're interviewing scientists and experts about the biological effects of glyphosate, the implications of food that's genetically modified, the varying farming practices, et cetera. But you seem to have a very clear conclusion about what this food represents as a mom, who's trying to raise a healthy family. And I heard you use the word poison. How do you look at this? How do you see it?
I don't know how else you can view it other than poison. In 2015, the IARC, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, declared glyphosate to probably be a human carcinogen. And since then, Monsanto, of course, has tried to get them to retract that statement and tried to discredit them in any way possible, but they know that it causes cancer. Right now, there is a current class action lawsuit happening in Northern California that Bobby Kennedy Jr. is actually spearheading. He, along with a few dozen non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer patients, are actually suing Monsanto over glyphosate. And in these court proceedings, it came out that Jess Rowland is the division deputy director in charge of the pesticide division at the EPA. And court documents show that he actually colluded with Monsanto for almost 40 years to hide the carcinogenicity of Roundup. He's quoted as saying, "If I can kill this, I should get a medal," in regards to cancer assessment research that he had done. In 2013, a very well-respected toxicologist, her name was Marion Copley, she actually had to leave the agency because she was battling breast cancer. She wrote a letter pleading with him to stop conniving and manipulating the science around Roundup. So, they know that it causes cancer. It's not just various agencies and independent scientists that are calling into question. Monsanto and the EPA have known for a long time, and they've buried the research.
Wow. So there's outrage in some sectors, mm-hmm. but the media doesn't talk about it. So what do you see moving forward as far as trying to create a public awareness, about the poison that is Roundup, about the fraud and malfeasance, on the government and scientific level that is basically in collusion with the companies as you described? What do you think the best way is to go out and try to heighten the awareness and get something done about this?
Well, I think my organization, March Against Monsanto, we do a pretty good job. I think it's good to get out and empower your communities and create new leaders. I think that is one of the things I am most proud of with my work, is how many people have stepped up and have ran for city councils, and they're on their school boards. Change starts small. Mm-hmm. And if we can, ban Roundup from our schools, ban them from our city parks, it has a domino effect.
You talked about, did you call it genetic literacy?
In that same court proceeding that's happening in Northern California, it came out that the Genetic Literacy Project, which a lot of the pro-GMO crowd looks to for, to basically discredit our side of the story, as well as the American Council for Science and Health. Those are actually front groups for Monsanto. It turns out they're funneling millions of dollars into these think tanks to discredit anybody that speaks out in opposition to GMOs and the requisite herbicide and pesticides that go with them.
It's also standard practice in the pharmaceutical industry, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities.
The makers of the drugs create nonprofits that are advocates for helping to solve problems through this medication, but there's again a complete conflict of interest. So
exactly.
Does March Against Monsanto expose that to the world?
Yeah, we do. Of course, they come back. The Genetic Literacy Project actually has a writer that writes for Forbes, which is obviously a pretty well-read publication. So, we're fighting up against a lot of money, and we're very grassroots. So we just keep doing what we're doing, and like I said, just empowering communities and trying to create new leaders to join in the fight, build our army.
So out of these years of work that you've put in now and all this activism, which I really want to tell you that I appreciate and admire.
Thank you.
What's the thing that has outraged you most along the way?
Finding out that the EPA has colluded with Monsanto is extremely angering. We have a taxpayer-funded organization that is working with big business. We as taxpayers are essentially funding an organization that is help propelling our cancer epidemic.
Right, and that we're supposed to have the public trust because this is a government organization, right?
Exactly.
So here we're supposed to have the government trust in this organization. Our tax dollars are being used to fund it, as you cited, and it is literally working against our best interest. It's supposed to protect us from this kind of toxic stuff.
Exactly.
And yet it's working against our own interest. Yeah, that is an outrage, isn't it?
It is.
So what do you see happening, moving down the road? Do you see a status quo? Do you think there's going to be some changes? Are you optimistic, pessimistic?
I am an optimistic person, but I think that a lot more people need to start caring and fighting back because, frankly, we are running out of time to stop this. There's going to be a point we reach where it's a point of no return. Mm-hmm. We see glyphosate, it's ubiquitous. It's in the breast milk of nursing mothers. It was detected in urine samples of every single person that was tested. It's in air and rain samples. It's even been found as a contaminant in vaccines given to children. It's everywhere. Wow,
so here's the thing that I would like to try to understand and have our viewers also understand. How an issue like this becomes an issue of conscience, and how you decide one person individually to take a stand on it, and the impact that can have, that you, a stay-at-home mom, trying to raise healthy children, observe something that's wrong in the world, and that you could stand up and create something that months later has got millions of people around the world marching for the cause. So what message would you have for people who are watching this who aren't doctors, aren't scientists, aren't politicians, they're not people in an area of influence or expertise, but as you said, the food supply affects us all. What would you say to them as far as the fact that they can feel empowered to get involved in this fight?
Well, I think the single most important thing anyone can do is vote with your wallets. Make good choices at the supermarket. Stop buying Roundup. Stop supporting corporations that are poisoning us, that don't have any regard for life or the environment.
And is there ways that you march against Monsanto on your website, Facebook page, what have you, that if they said, hey, well, I want to share this with my friends on my Facebook page, do you have resources for them to be able to
absolutely.
engage?
And we work with a bunch of great organizations, Organic Consumers Association, Moms Across America, GMO Free America. These are all great resources, so anybody's welcome to email us at addmymarch@gmail.com, and we will help them get on the right path to a cleaner, healthier existence.
One more time, that email?
addmymarch@gmail.com.
addmymarch@gmail.com.
Yes.
I love it. Do you feel like you've influenced the lives of families and have helped to save some children through what you've done?
I like to think so. I mean, my work is time away from my family, so I hope that there's a positive outcome in that, because, you know, I do take time away from my family to fight for others.
And I think, did I hear earlier when we were offset, you say that you're up very early?
I do. I get up really, really early and work in between school and being the chauffeur and the cook, and you know how the life of a stay-at-home mom goes. It's very hectic, and then with all my activism on top of it, it makes for early mornings and late nights.
It does. And are you slowing down at all, or are you keeping going?
No, I'm going to keep going. We can't stop now. There's still a lot of work to be done, and a lot of lives to set on a better path.
Obviously, if you're going to understand this issue, you have to understand some science, right? And some of this can seem somewhat complex. And I've been interviewing scientists, about this issue, and it can get intimidating. So, were you intimidated by the science as you were digging in here?
Yeah, there's definitely points of intimidation. I have to go and really research because I want to know that what I'm saying is correct. Yeah, definitely.
But you got past the fact of being intimidated and started to literally develop your own understanding of the science regarding the issue. Where did the science take you?
Well, as you said, I'm not a scientist. I'm very lay person, so I feel I bring a lot to the table because I'm able to convey that to people without getting too technical. Some of the research that I've done is on glyphosate. We understand that glyphosate is what the ingredient in Roundup that makes it so toxic. But being a naturally curious person, I wanted to know what made glyphosate so harmful. And my friend Dr. Christian Bogner actually helped me. We discovered that glyphosate is made by heat fusing glycine, formaldehyde, and phosphorus acid, which is so dangerous that it's actually stored underwater. And that a watered down version of phosphorus acid is used to make glyphosate, but it's actually used to make white phosphorus, which is a chemical weapon of war. So when you think of it like that and how much of it's being sprayed on our food, I mean, since 1974, 19 billion pounds, 2/3 of which have been used in the last 10 years alone. It's just, no wonder everyone has cancer, it seems. It's really awful.
Wow. So any other things that were startling to you when you started to dig into the science that you said, wow, this is much worse than I ever imagined?
Well, I know I mentioned about the Gerber puffs. It was really shocking to learn that genetically modified corn is registered with the EPA as a pesticide. It's not even classified as a food. And corn isn't everything. They think of how many corn derivative ingredients there are in, so much of the food that's in our grocery stores. It's really scary.
Yeah, corn syrups, et cetera.
High fructose corn syrup. Just all these chemical nonsense.
It's almost, it's very difficult to escape it all, isn't it?
It is.
Even if you have the desire to.
Yeah, I recommend shopping the perimeter. Don't go down the aisles.
What does that mean, to shop the perimeter?
Like of the grocery store, stay in the fresh stuff.
And don't go down the center aisles?
Don't go down the center aisles. Avoid them if you can.
I need to get into the psychology of this a little bit, because I am still in awe of a mom who sees a commercial, who does some research, who launches a movement, and a few months later, millions of people around the world are aligned. What was your self-image at that point? Why did you think you could make a difference?
I don't know that I necessarily thought I could. I just knew that I couldn't not try to do something. I mean, I had no way of knowing that it would turn into an international movement. I was just so upset about everything that I had discovered in such a short time that I couldn't stay silent.
So it was an issue of conscience, basically.
Absolutely.
Like your conscience didn't allow you to turn a blind eye.
Absolutely.
And
if I wouldn't let my kids eat it, I wouldn't want someone else's child consuming it either.
And wouldn't it be great if the people who are charged with the societal health had a similar concept, right?
It would be amazing.
Yeah.
The world, the landscape of the world would be quite different.
Wow. So your friends, your family, did anybody tell you were crazy for taking this on?
All of them.
All of them?
All of them.
What did they
Yeah.
say to you?
Just, you're insane to take on a corporation like Monsanto. You're never going to change anything. And I'm really stubborn, so when people, think I can't do something, it makes me more determined to do it.
Did you have the moment after millions of people aligned with your cause to look at them and say, don't ever tell me I can't do something if my mind's committed to it?
I might have said something like that.
And did they change their views?
Yeah, my family, they were, my mom especially, she's like, I've never heard of GMOs, they can't be that bad or they wouldn't be on the market kind of mentality. And even now she eats organic and has seen the error of her ways. I used to be horrified. She'd have us over for dinner and she'd be serving corn on the cob. I'm like, we're not eating that.
Wow, so isn't that interesting? Because this is the blind trust misplaced in our government, corporations, agencies of the government, right? Is saying, well, if I haven't heard much about it, it must be fine.
Mm-hmm. Or the government wouldn't allow us to have something that was going to be harmful to us. Wow. It's really a twisted perspective that a lot of people have.
At their own peril,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
So the whole idea of self-responsibility really emerges here. And obviously you took responsibility, on your own independently to go do this. You had people telling you that you were crazy, and then obviously it struck a chord, and you got a lot of support. What did that feel like?
That was amazing, and like I said, to just see people changing the way that they eat, the way that they tend to their gardens. March Against Monsanto is obviously having an impact on people's lives, and that's a great feeling.
Yeah, and the acceptance of it on the scale, because again, to me, the scale of it is what's extraordinary. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who would write blogs and do different things, but this is really something on a worldwide scale involving millions of people on an issue that that a lot of people care about. You don't have, I suppose, you don't have any background prior to this as some sort of a community organizer, or
No. Like I said, I was a server in a restaurant and then had babies and stayed home. Never any activism experience or event coordinating experience.
So people are watching this now, and a lot of these people are very, very similar to you in many ways. What advice do you have for them? What should they be thinking and doing? What can they see when they look in the mirror that might cause them to take an action that they're not seeing right now?
I think people should think global but act local. Like I said, we need to really work on banning glyphosate from our communities and our schools. I mean, this poison is being sprayed where our children play and learn, which is absolutely unacceptable. And like I said, voting with your wallet is the most important thing you can do. Every time you spend $1 in the grocery store, you're choosing the world you want to live in. And if you're continuing to buy products that are made by manufacturers who have no regard for the health of the environment or we citizens, you're supporting them and you're supporting the opposition.
Essentially, you're supporting your own destruction.
You are.
Right?
That's a very good way of putting it.
So now, and this is maybe very interesting because I think a lot of people, and there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, I think a lot of people are targeting a top-down approach. We have to go after legislation. We have to go after Monsanto. But you're going after a behemoth that's well-funded, that has a very strong conviction to not only hold the line, but to expand what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But it seems so logical, yet so simple to say, well, listen, if your town of, any town USA, or any other part of the world for that matter, decides that it's going to ban glyphosate from its local infrastructure, then that's the way to keep it, to keep it out of your neighborhood. And then it goes to the next neighborhood, the next neighborhood.
Exactly.
And then suddenly that can, so rather than try to wait for high leverage points to move down to the local level, your approach is, let's take care of it at the local level, and it will be a bottom-up approach to taking away from them. Don't buy their foods, don't let it in your town, and you can see that collectively, when you start to put these pieces together in that puzzle, it has upstream effects that can derail this very malicious agenda.
I sure hope so. And it's being done in counties in Oregon. They've already managed to ban GMOs, GMO cultivation in certain counties. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but so it's possible.
And so how clear to you is that not only is it possible, but this is really the best strategy for us to try to tackle this problem?
I mean, it's obviously the only strategy we really have. We can't sit around waiting for the federal government, who's basically in bed with these biotech companies, to do anything. I mean, November of last year, the United States actually became the first country in the world to ban GMO labeling. We have 40 countries around the world that ban GMOs, but in the US, we ban GMO labeling. So we can't wait for the federal government to save us. We have to act within our communities if we're going to change this.
And to me, it is, I can't come up with any kind of a rational argument that says that we should ban the ability to tell the truth about what's inside of a package.
Right. There's a really famous quote that says, you know, we're required to label our mattresses, but we don't have to label our food. It's just so backwards.
Yeah, I would say. So speaking to this worldwide audience now with GMOs revealed, any final thoughts that you have for them that you'd really like them to hear from you, and any sense of what the future might bring based on what you're seeing right now?
I think that we have to care enough about the future to change things now. For me, I don't want this fight to be left for my children. That's just not fair for them to inherit this world just riddled with toxic chemical agriculture and food that's unsafe to eat. So I would just really encourage everybody to really start making change within their own households. We can't change the way someone else does something, but we can absolutely change our actions, and just hopefully that will ripple.
Well, I'd like to encourage everybody to take the information that you're disseminating and to share it. The media blackout, is really in and of itself, at least maybe not legally, but morally criminal.
Yes, it is.
And yet you happen to have proven that through social media and through efforts, we could still get the message out so people understand what's really going on and action they can take. So I want to encourage everybody watching to disseminate the information that you've been providing so generously for all these years. And go ahead.
And support the alternative media, because they do cover what we're doing. I mean, there's great outlets, the Anti-Media, the Free Thought Project. These are great resources for people to get the actual news about what's going on, because you're not going to hear it on CNN. That's the fact.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say on behalf of all those children that you'll never know whose lives you've affected, and for all of the people who have a stake in seeing the world function in a rational or better way, thank you. Thank you for deciding to make an effort and make a difference in the world.
Well, thank you for including me in your documentary.
I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. Now, tomorrow, we have a little bit of a unique twist in our episode. Tony Bark is going to interview a farm consultant named Robert Sake. And what's interesting is that Robert Sake kept saying basically, oh, you're never going to run this, you're never going to let people see this, etc. Well, we're running the whole thing. So let's look at what a pro-GMO person has to say who consults with farmers, and you make up your own mind about what you think the validity of his arguments are. In addition to that, we have an interview with somebody that I know and admire and have known him for many years. He's the former CEO of GNC Stores, amongst many other things, and this is Greg Horn. Greg Horn is also the CEO and founder of Specialty Nutrition Group, and he has spent his entire life in the realm of health and nutrition. So check out what Greg has to say about this GMO issue. Now, I've been very heartened by the fact that many people have contacted us wanting to know if they can own this series, and the answer is yes. Available right here on this page, we have multiple packages. They're in 2 categories, gold or silver, and you can choose the one that's right for you. This information is vital to own, and it's so comprehensive that you can revisit it many times and in many formats. Support this movement. Own this series. Let other people know about it and recommend that they own it too. This information needs to be out there in the world, in your possession. We know that knowledge is power, and we want to deliver it to you on a silver platter, or maybe if you prefer the gold package, a gold platter. But we want you to own this information so that you're empowered with it and you can move forward with it. And if you ever need to have the reference to go back to, it's there. And if you ever need to have an argument for people who are trying to say that GMOs aren't bad for us, that glyphosate's not as big a deal as you think it might be, the answer is yes, it is. And here's our list of experts. Here's additional bonus materials. Here's an entire universe presented to you that you can own and that you can access at your discretion. So please support GMOs Revealed, own this material, and share it with the world.